mine. It's mine, my own. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, and I think this is working. Yes, yeah, looks good. Okay, cool. Shabbat shalom, everybody. So I trust you guys had a good week this week. Yeah, yeah. It's been a busy one for me. It was a midterms week, so I was kind of all over the place. But it happens that so I'm going to just jump right in, okay? So we're looking at the Torah portion called Chayei Sarah, right? And does anybody know what that means? Life of Sarah, or lives. Who knows? It could be plural. I think it's life. But there's interesting midrash that goes along with the idea that it's plural. Anyway, I'm not talking about that. So it means the life of Sarah. And it's encompassing Genesis 23 through 25, verse 18. I'm only going to go through 23 and 24. Okay. So if you guys want to get your Tanakhs out, I promise we're actually going to use them this time. So yeah, be sure to do that. And we're going to open up to Genesis 23. So to begin with, I want to give a little bit of backstory on my week and what I've been thinking about for this portion. So like I said, it was a midterm week this week, and for one of my classes on Chinese and Japanese religions, I was studying Confucianism and Taoism, okay? And I had to write a paper on that this week, and so it's been something I've been looking into for that purpose. Now, for those of you who don't know, Confucius, his name was Kongfusi, right? He was a Chinese scholar who lived during the Warring States period, which is a time when there was no dynasty, and he was basically just going from court to court trying to find some emperor that would take him as his advisor, but he didn't find anybody. So it was the Warring States period. He was a conservative, and a conservative for them meant that he believed in going back to the ways of the early Zhou dynasty, and before that the Xia dynasty. And they had ways that they followed that he believed they should return to. And some of those ways were things like ritual propriety and politeness and etiquette. And that was very, very important. Very important. And so he argued that the early Zhou and the Xia dynasty lost their mandate of heaven, which is a concept like anointing for us. They lost their mandate of heaven and they lost their dynasty because they stopped keeping those ways for them. I'm not endorsing, I'm just talking to you about what he believed and what he was teaching. And so in this sense, he was sort of like a Chinese version of our prophets, calling people to return to Torah, but instead he's calling people to return to those ritual proprieties. And so some of those proprieties that he believed in were called benevolence, filial piety, and those are called Ren and Li in Chinese, and a few others. I'm not going to go over all of them because it's pretty immense. But filial piety is basically the relationships. There's 5 relationships, like between a father and a son and an older son, and an employer and his employed, etc. And he believed that these relationships had to be characterized by benevolence and by being in their roles. So he was a big conservative. So he basically was concerned about how people address each other, how they conduct themselves, etc. So as I'm studying this guy who's very concerned about these things, and I'm seeing that that's why the Asian countries are very, very careful to keep their etiquette in mind. They keep their manners in mind. They know what their place is in their society, and it's changing, of course, but that's very ingrained in Asian societies. And so as I'm thinking about these things and I'm reading the Torah portion studying for this week, all these proprieties and rituals and ways that people interacted started jumping out the page, right? And I started thinking, the Chinese, maybe they weren't so different in that sense. They had very important emphasis on how to interact with each other and etiquette and treating each other with respect. So that's what I'm going to talk about, is etiquette, honor, and politeness ritual in Chayei Sarah. So
I don't really think, just so you guys know, I don't think that any of you guys really need a slap on the face about this. I'm not trying to preach to you. You guys are doing good. We're all good here. I mean, I'm just trying to say this because I think it's something that's important for us to know, and it's important for us to value. Because if we're coming back together as a nation again, if we're growing as a nation, what kind of nation doesn't have a high culture, right? A nation needs to have values, and it needs to have a way that it conducts itself. And so these are things that I think we need to be thinking about. And so that's why I'm talking about this. So nowadays, most people aren't too concerned with etiquette, right? It seems like it's pretty much died out. There's a few exceptions. Some people still hold doors open. You raise your hands if you hold your door open for a woman. Yeah? There's still gentlemen and gentle ladies, I guess, that do that as well. But, it's pretty much dying out, unfortunately. And another thing that Rico Cortez and Daniel McGurr and other people in his ministry talk about a lot is the honor-shame context in the Eastern cultures. And I think that's died out as well. It used to be, if you went up and you insulted somebody, I challenge you to a duel, right? And they'd go and duke it out, and he'd preserve his honor, yeah? And that's not the way we do it anymore. Nowadays, if you punch somebody, you'll get arrested and you'll get sued, and you can't preserve your honor in that way anymore. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying that we lost our honor culture, right? Oh, kind of. I'll get back to that. We still have a sort of an honor culture. Anyhow, so basically every culture for thousands of years back has had an honor culture, and they've had rituals and politeness towards each other in their own different ways. So the fact that we are kind of rejecting this is interesting. It's a novelty. It's new. It's kind of it's weird because most societies have all been punctuated with this sort of ritual respect towards each other and etiquette, but we're getting rid of that. So I want to ask, I want to point out too, even us in the way of Yeshua and walking out Torah, we're coming back to it, but even us, we have the baggage of our culture. And so we all sort of sometimes do the same things. Like we don't say thank you and please sometimes. We don't. I mean, these are Western etiquette. I'm not talking that you have to do this, and if you don't say please and thank you, you're not following Torah. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we don't really have much of an etiquette anymore. And we've also come to view etiquette and ritual with a sort of negative point of view. I mean, a lot of people say, you got to walk in the spirit and not the letter, right? And that's a true statement, but that's not supposed to be a statement that's negative towards the letter. That's supposed to be a statement that's saying the spirit fulfills the letter. And so we in our theologies have this negative point of view towards ritual and how to walk things out, and we say that's legalistic. So we got to be careful. We got to be careful of that. Certainly in our utilitarian culture, politeness and etiquette have pretty much become obsolete. It just takes too much time, right? We're go, go, go. We've got increased synchronicity. We have somewhere to be. And it takes long enough, who says, hi, how are you, before ordering their coffee anymore? They just say, they just want to order the thing. They say, give me a venti, ice, skinny, hazelnut, macchiato, sugar-free syrup, extra shots, light ice, no whip. And then they're off. And remember, I said gimme in the beginning of that. That's what they say. And I'm sure Anna can attest to that, right, Anna? Where's Anna? Yep, she can attest to that. Can you make that order? Hey, we got a master in the house here, a master of the coffees. That's not coffee, guys. That's candy. Okay. Anyway, sorry. So our utilitarianism is kind of the thing I think that's broken down our politeness. It's just too darn inconvenient. Why hold open a door, for instance, or pull out a chair for a young woman, or pay for her meal or her drink when she has been inculcated with the belief that this constitutes sexual aggression and chauvinism, patriarchy? Yeah? You don't want to watch this video on YouTube, by the way. Don't. Yeah. you will become very angry. But she's become sort of a folk star for, you know, a poster child for angry feminists. Anyhow, that's sort of the thing. What, I can't make my own food or pay for it myself, you male chauvinist pig. So in spite of this, you know, a lot of people out there still despair over the loss of respect for one another. And we wonder, you know, why can't we just get along, etc. Why can't all religions just come together and be nice to each other? And they have this idea still in their head that there should be respect and cooperation, but they've rejected what comes with that. So, you know, they also, in the intelligentsia, they reject a lot of these rituals and these ways of interacting as old and obsolete. And I know this because I'm taking a world archaeology class right now, and they often they're like, oh, this is Stone Age, and these you know, poor nitwits couldn't even make anything. You know, they're just making stone tools. And then I think, why don't you go try and make a stone tool and see how easy that is? Because that's not very easy. You have to know a thing or two to make a stone tool and do things with it, and to hunt, and to, you know, how to eat an animal without contracting some disease because it wasn't cooked. You have to know that you have to cook, etc. They weren't dummies, okay? And we have this sort of, the intelligentsia has this idea of primitivism, but yet, out of the same breath, they talk about their ingenious inventions, things like the pyramids, and like, you know, the Colosseums, and that's not a Colosseum, that's a temple in Athens, and that's in India, right there. They talk about these great monuments, and man, let me ask you, how much cooperation in a society does it take to build these kind of things? Do you think the society was just a bunch of people that were fighting with each other and not getting along? They had to cooperate to build these kind of things. And yet they don't think about that. They denigrate the ritual, they denigrate the politeness, they denigrate the archaic patriarchal ways, quote unquote. And yet they also praise these kind of things. They praise them for those, you know, they bash the structures and norms that made those things come about in the first place, is what I'm trying to say. So why be polite and courteous? For us as followers of God, it's because God commands it. And yes, I think he does command it. Basically, where I see that is basically the entire Torah. Think about it. The entire Torah is talking about ways and situations where people have a problem with each other. For instance, your ox just gored my whatever, my other ox, or you just stole my cloak. You didn't pay me my wages when I should have gotten my wages paid. And all the Torah is talking about how to deal with these conflicts. It's about etiquette and how to work with each other and about social rules. And that's a general explanation on it. But think about this too. The temple sacrifices, the temple rituals. Do you think the priest there could just go into the Holy of Holies wearing a Nike sweatpants and a sweatshirt with Doritos on it? Dorito stains? Like people walk around in Walmart today? No. No, people go out in public wearing that, and yet they don't realize, you know, he couldn't go into there wearing that kind of thing. He'd be struck down. See, language is deteriorating also. Basically, you know, we see all these sorts of propriety rituals in the scripture. There's also commandments, general commandments that are more specific, like love thy neighbor as thyself. Yeah. And that endorses a system of consideration and respect towards one another. We're commanded in Torah to show love and respect even to animals. Yeah? You remember? There's plenty of places where it says things about how to treat your animal correctly. You know, you want to get a bird's eggs? Well, don't kill the mother with it. You take the eggs and you leave the mother so she can make more eggs, and you don't destroy the population. So there's all kinds of different ways that the Torah has personal refinement and politeness towards each other. And if you can't see that in the Hebrew scriptures, the New Testament's full of it too. I'm not saying full of it in that negative way. I'm saying it's full of it. You know, things like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what our Master Yeshua said. And we all wish for others to show consideration and respect, right? I want to be shown consideration and respect. Do you guys? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So then that means that the Torah commands us to do unto others as we, Yeshua is the living Torah. We're to do that. That means that he's commanding respect and politeness. What about love thy enemy or bless those who curse you? And those, I think those things are reiterations of when Solomon, even before that, when he said, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink, for you shall heap coals of fire upon his head, and Yahweh will reward you. So these are things that are not new. Okay, it's all being repeated. This is an ethic I see all throughout the Torah, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. Paul also, he commands propriety in many times. Let's say Acts 15, for example. The council in Jerusalem. What do? They say, you have improper behavior. As a new convert, you have to stop doing these 4 improper behaviors if you want to fellowship in our fellowships. And during those fellowships, you'll learn and you'll grow doing more. But until then, you need to stop at least these 4 things. And those 4 things included sexual immorality and, things about ritual cleanness, like eating blood, eating things that are torn, and that sort of thing. So he's commanding this propriety himself. And this is Paul, the one who says, people say he's against the Torah. He also says, walk in wisdom towards those that are outsiders, redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. So, seasoned with salt. What is salt in the ancient world? Salt is a preservative. Salt is a purifier. It brings the blood out so you can eat your kosher meat, right? Salt is a very important element in the ancient world. And he says, be as salt. Don't lose your saltiness. So this is a scriptural precedent for good manners. If you can't see it, I'm sorry. You need to get your eyes checked. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't resist. That dog was just so cute. I had to put it in the slideshow. I apologize. Yeah. But you do. If you can't see it, then just get your eyes checked for me, please. I know a good place to do that. Some may say that etiquette, politeness, and social ritual are antiquated, but I think that God disagrees with them. So what does politeness ritual accomplish when we act in these ways towards each other? First of all, I think it shows individuals respect. It makes them feel valued and honored. It shows them that you see the image of God in them. Now, we're all created in the image of God, yes. Humanity is created in the image of God. We have the intellect and we have understanding. We have the capacity for self-reflection. Okay? These are things that separate us from animals, that make us better. Animals don't build societies like we do. They have very, 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 I'll call their societies primitive. I'm not going to call human societies primitive. Their societies are primitive, okay? It shows that you see the image of God in them. And whether you agree with them or not about what they're believing or doing, if you're respecting somebody, you're seeing that God loves all people. He wants all people to go and to be with him. He wants all people to be saved. And if we're just yelling and screaming at each other or at other people, even though we disagree with them, that's not showing them the kind of love that God shows them. I'm not saying that God doesn't punish or that he doesn't rebuke, etc. He does. Just think of him like a father. Yeah. Oh, I lost my connection. Here we go. So yeah, these things separate us from the beasts. It improves their self-esteem and their confidence and their sense of worth. That's important for a healthy person. And it causes them to respect you and enjoy your company. So how to win friends and influence people, right? It makes them like you if you are polite and nice to them, okay? And it's good when people like you because then you have connections, you have networks, you can get better jobs, you can get better, more support when you need support, if you're going through a hard time, etc. It's good. Now, what about societies? What does showing ritual respect and propriety do for a society? Among other things, I would say it, whoops, I went too far. I would say that it creates an atmosphere of stability, of goodwill, and good morale. And it creates a high culture, wherein polite and genteel behavior is the norm, and deviation from which results in dishonor and shame. That's something we want in our nation, right? I want us to dishonor those who are breaking the honor code, the Torah. Not that we're supposed to shame them and gossip about them. That's not what I'm saying. When I say dishonor, I mean that they incur a status of dishonor on themselves. They do it themselves when they break the Torah. They're embarrassing themselves. They're causing God to be separated from them, because a holy God cannot be in the presence of sinful people. They have to be covered by the blood. And if you're covered by the blood and going about doing all these abominable things, what does that say about if you're really covered or not? It doesn't. I'm just going to leave it at that. So it causes people to have a standard, in other words, of respect towards each other. And if somebody's rude and dishonorable, then that's looked down upon. It lowers the crime rate. That's really practical. It improves societal cohesion, and it helps us to disagree agreeably. Right now, we are in a society in America that is very, very divided. We're very ideologically divided, and it wasn't always that way. People had their disagreements, but they didn't flame each other. They didn't dig up dirt. They didn't make up all these fake things that they could try to snag the politicians in and destroy their honor. They didn't make up all these stories. It wasn't. I mean, it's been going for a while, but it wasn't the whole history of this nation. We've only since become really, really, really dishonorable in our disagreement. So if we respected each other, we would be able to disagree agreeably, I think. In a dog-eat-dog world where naturalism is the order of the day and survival of the fittest is the motto of the elite or the intelligentsia, taking time to show respect to each other and to disadvantage yourself, essentially, for someone else's benefit, that is going against nature, right? It's going against nature in their opinion. And so it shows us that we're higher than that. We're higher than our base instincts and our base our base desires, that we can control ourselves. Yes? Beasts don't do that, like I said. It's a sign of the image of God to be able to do this. And it's a sign of that we're demonstrating the fruit of the Holy Spirit when we walk in self-control, when we walk in love towards one another, etc. So now let's transition a little bit to the portion. And we're going to look over the different areas where I see etiquette and things like that being played out in the portion. So if you guys want to open up your scripture to that, I'm not going to read along, but I will point out areas that you can read at, and you can see what I'm talking about that way. Does that work? All right. So first of all, in the first few verses of Genesis 23, we see Abraham mourns Sarah's death. Now, what does that mean? That means that death is a bad thing, and Abraham is mourning for it. He's not just throwing her in a ditch and burying her, yeah? He is actually showing respect and honor towards her life and what it was. So he is honoring her life. If we move down a little bit, when he starts talking to the Hittites, he's negotiating. He's saying he's not simply taking what God promised to him by force, he's negotiating with them first. Okay, so that's showing respect to his neighbors, that it's not their time yet to be uprooted from the land. Their sin hasn't been brought to its fullness. I know there's a scripture that says that. He's showing respect to them by negotiating with them for the land. Now, in his negotiation, you're going to see formal language being used, extra words. Like, for instance, in verse 6, the Hittites say, "Hear us, my Lord." So why should they have to say, "Hear us"? That's extra flowery language. Why do they have to say, "My Lord," or Adoni? That's a respectful term towards Abraham. Yeah. So they're showing these respectful words. If it be your mind, Abraham says later in this area. He says it in verse 8. If it be your mind that I should bury my dead, then, etc. These are flowery terms, and it's respectful language that is meant to ease your way into the conversation instead of just going in with a big hammer and hammering him. Okay? That's a sign of politeness. Now, later on here, you'll see that they're being amicable. They're addressing Abraham as Adoni Nasi Elohim. They're basically calling him a prince of God. I mean, that's very respectful. And that also tells us Abraham wasn't just some wandering tent-dwelling bum. He was a very rich man. He had many servants. He had enough camels to go and send them to Rebekah, right? He had gold rings and stuff to give her for a dowry. That wasn't all his wealth. He was a rich man, and there's a lot of evidence for it in the scripture. I'm not going to talk about that, but he was a prince of God. The Hittites down in there, they offer him the choicest grave to Abraham, and this is what I'll call a Middle Eastern generosity veneer. Okay, they're being generous. They're giving this veneer of generosity, even though they really don't want to give it for free. They're knowing that if they say these things, that Abraham, in his politeness, is going to start the negotiations for a price. So it's a Middle Eastern veneer of generosity. They're saying, take the best of our graves. Okay, it's very respectful. Abraham then, here's a curious verse. Abraham stands up, right? Let's see where that verse is here. I wish I coordinated these here. Thereupon, Abraham, so in the Hebrew here, in the JPS, it's just saying thereupon, but if you look at it, it says, and Abraham stood up and bowed. So it means he gets up and he bows. Like, why do you have to get up and then get down? He's showing respect to them for their generosity and their willingness to go along with it, and humility too. Abraham entreats the Hittite group to socially pressure Ephron to sell his property. So he doesn't say, hey, Ephron over there, hey, Ephron, I want your property. He says, if it be your will, then can you guys tell Ephron over there that I'd like his property? So he's creating a barrier between himself and the one he wants the property of, so that their social group can put the pressure on Ephron to deliver it, right? You see that? Yeah? Okay. I'll move on. So Ephron is now feeling the social pressure, but Ephron, of course, he wants financial gain. He doesn't want to give this expensive land for free. So he's going to offer the land as a gift to Abraham. Again, that Middle Eastern generosity veneer. But he's going to expect Abraham to offer to purchase. If Abraham doesn't offer to purchase the land, then that land ownership can later be disputed. Okay? And also, it will dishonor Abraham because he will be seen as a stingy, moocher, basically. So he doesn't want Abraham. He wants Abraham to protect his honor by offering a price. So Abraham bows again and offers to purchase again, and Abraham is basically seeking to honor his wife and the future generations of Israel by ensuring that this burial is a timeless burial for anybody in his family, that it can't be disputed. And the sages say there's 3 places that nobody in the world can dispute the ownership of. And that is the 3 places in Scripture you see them buying the land from the Gentiles. This is one of them. Another one was, David buying the temple threshing floor, the Temple Mount, from whatever his name was. I don't remember. But yeah, there's a few other ones. Anyhow, they can't dispute that this belongs to him. Now, Ephron, knowing this, he's going to seek the gain using this generosity veneer, and he's going to ask the asking price in the form of just a friendly relationship. So he says, what is 400 shekels between you and I? And by the way, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. There's some people that if you go on the web and you research it, there's some people that they put down a smaller amount than it really is. They're wrong. So be careful about what the the research that you're looking at, when you actually look into it, this is a very considerable sum for this land. And that's normal. Haggling societies, they put a high price, and then you knock it way, way down, and then you end up somewhere here in the middle. We're completely detached from that haggling society. So if Abraham haggles the price lower, maybe Ephron can later claim that Abraham got it unfairly because he was pressuring and he got a low price, and so there could be a dispute. So what does Abraham do? Abraham listened to Ephron, and I think the reason that the text says he listened is because it's saying he's listening between the lines. He's hearing what Ephron's intent really is. And he knows that Ephron wants to get that money. So Abraham weighs out the silver without even bartering. So now the honor is in Abraham's court. He has the honor of ensuring his wife's burial and the future generation's burial. And Ephron, he can get out of it without having to be poor. So the shekels are also market value. There's a text that says that in there. Yeah? That means that there's a standard of bartering between societies. So that means that there's a structure in place. Okay? They're civilized. Abraham receives the deed to the land. That's where it says it was made sure unto Abraham in the gates. So this suggests that there's a system of documentation for land ownership. Okay? They weren't just backwards primitives. They were civilized. Okay, now we're going to go to the next chapter and see some more of these sorts of things. I'm going to go a little faster here. Abraham entreats, in chapter 24, Abraham entreats Eliezer to swear an oath. Okay? Now here's where it's going to get a little awkward. Bear with me. Hands on the genital oath, they say thigh. Okay, it's not thigh. Sorry. I wish it were, so you guys didn't have to get red, but it was not. This is a way of swearing by the seed of Abraham. And remember, God says your seed will be like the stars of heaven and the sands of the seashore. So in a sense, he is swearing by God's covenant. Okay? And he's also swearing regarding the seed of Abraham. He's going to try to find a wife for Isaac. Okay? So this is not something, there's nothing in the text that says this was an awkward interaction. Okay, this was a normal thing. Any commentators that you read or websites or clickbait that you read that try to say there's a homosexual connotation here, they're completely misunderstanding it, and it's anachronistic to insert that into the text. It's not there. Okay? So moving on. Ritual oath is expounded upon. It's by heaven and earth that he swears. Breaking this oath is going to bring dishonor to Eliezer if he breaks it, if he fails. So Eliezer needs to keep the oath. The terms of the oath are given, and they're very clear and precise. He says, what if this happens? Well, then this. What if this happens? Well, then this. Okay, it's very clear terms. Eliezer brings gifts to the camels, or brings gifts and camels in advance. He doesn't bring gifts to the camels. I don't know if the camels really need gifts. But yeah, he brings camels in advance to impress Rebecca, basically. He's doing it to impress whoever the young woman is and their family. Because Abraham, again, as I said, is a very rich man. He displays his status as a servant of a very powerful person that way. Eliezer then makes a prophetic conditional prayer. Now, I say it's prophetic. A lot of people say this is divination. And they say, well, how come Eliezer divinated when it says in the Torah that you can't divinate? I think Eliezer was making a prophetic prayer. Why do I think that? Because the text says that Rebecca showed up, I think it says actually before he even finished talking, or as he's finishing talking, she comes out of the gates, right? That means that she was on her way as he's praying this. This is a prophetic prayer. He's not divinating. It's happening as he's doing it. Okay, that's really awesome. So now he's relying on God to complete this difficult task. He's basically finding a needle in a haystack. You guys know Ur was a very big city in Mesopotamia. 30,000, 40,000 people or so, the estimates are. It was one of the main foundational cities of Mesopotamia. So it was not an easy task that Abraham sent him to do. Eliezer's request is structured in a certain way. It's structured to eliminate women without manners, women without kindness, coarse and rough women. How do I say that? Well, he's basically asking for someone who will be submissive enough and humble and kind enough and polite enough to offer him a drink and his camels. That's a lot of work. So he structures it that way so that he'll filter out all the other women. The young women, by the way, are drawing the water, not the men. So this suggests that the culture had a system, it had roles in which the women had their job, the men had their job, etc. The women are drawing the water. Okay, I'm not. I think if a feminist read that, their head explodes, right? Because they don't like that. But you can't impose modern day values upon this ancient text. The woman drawing the water, they didn't care. It was completely normal. That was just life, and it wasn't a bad thing. Okay, so let's not commit this sort of anachronism by putting these things of our culture into the text. I hate that. That is a pet peeve of mine. It gets me, because then all these people that have their political goals, they can point to the scripture and say, well, see, it says this and this and this. Well, it doesn't say that. You're reading into it. Anyway, I digress. Rivka, it says, was beautiful. Okay, here's another one that feminists really don't like. The concept of beauty. Some women are beautiful. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's true. Some women are, and they say that that's a bad thing. I don't think so. It's just natural. Okay, it says Rivka was a virgin and no man knew her. Even in the wicked culture in which she lived, with all these fertility rites and practices and worship things that were happening, even in that culture, she was a virgin and she was not known by a man. So that suggests that she practiced personal propriety, right? Are you starting to see all the personal, interrelational, social roles, all these rituals and things that they're coming out of the text for you, right? Yeah? Okay, good. I'm not just talking to a wall. Rivka also addresses Eliezer as Adoni. She's aware of her relative status and functions according to these societal norms of ritual respect. She states that she will water the camels. Okay, think about this for a second. She states it. She doesn't say, hey, do you want me to water your camels? Should I? She says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to water your camels. Okay? That's a big deal. So she's taken initiative. That's a very, very respectful. She's going above and beyond her societal role of kindness to a stranger by doing all his work for him. Okay? Eliezer gives the jewelry to Rebecca, yeah, signifying a marriage dowry / proxy proposal. Okay, he's standing in Isaac's place doing this for him. Why Isaac wasn't there, I really don't know. I'm sorry. It's kind of something I don't really understand. Jacob went to get his wife. Isaac didn't go to get his wife. Isaac kind of just sat around and didn't do much. Sorry, but he didn't really. I mean, we could go into that later, but there's some theories as to why he didn't do a whole lot and what was going on with Isaac. That's not what I'm talking about today. So he gives the jewelry to her, and that is a marriage proposal for Isaac. That's a ritual between people to do so. Then they care for the animals first when they're going back to the house. Notice the order in the verse when she says, we have straw and provender for the camels. And then she says, we have a place for you. So this idea that they're taking care of the animals first, and then you, the rabbis say that there's a concept where you need to take care of your animals and give them their food before you take your food. It's a way to show kindness to living creatures. Rivka reports her parents and her guardians immediately. So she runs over there and she submits to their authority by telling them what's going on before just saying, yes, I'll marry you, let's go. She goes and she submits to their authority. Okay? Her brother Laban then runs out, and we know a little bit about Laban. He's kind of a greedy guy, just a hint. He goes out and he sees all these rings and all these things that are on Rivka, and he runs. He runs out to the city gates to see the camels and the riches of Eliezer and all his servants. Eliezer wasn't just a servant, he was a head of the house. Eliezer brought servants with him, and it says so in the text. He has all these servants, it's this big old parade, basically. And Laban's like, oh my goodness, we're going to get some good relatives out of this. Okay? So Laban notices all this stuff, and he sees Eliezer's status. Okay, so there's that concept of status, relative status. Caring for the animals, washing his feet, preparing a meal, this is Middle Eastern hospitality. Eliezer wasn't even alone, like I said. According to the text, it says there's multiple men with him. So they did this for all the men, too, that were with him. This is a big, big undertaking for their poor little house. Further down, when they're sitting at the dinner table, Eliezer puts the mission before the meal, and he discusses it before eating. He says, I will not eat until I tell you why I've come. And that's an honorable thing for him to do, to put his master's desires above his own tummy. See, that's rising above your natural instincts and doing what you know to be right. It all goes together. Eliezer doesn't demand the marriage, according to the omen. Rather, he explains the story, and he says, hey guys, this is what happened. This is how it happened. Can I have her for my master's son? He asks. Just like Abraham asked the Hittites, he didn't go and demand, say, hey, this happened, I'm a prophet of God, and this happened, and this is the Lord's word for you. And if you don't do it, then you're disobeying the Lord's word. Does that sound familiar? This is what I have to say about you. Well, I didn't hear him say it to me, but okay. So he submits to their status, and he gives them the honor of choosing whether to betroth Rivka to him or not. So later down, they have a covenant meal. Now we talk about covenant meals. That's a concept. Back then, if you eat with somebody, that's coming into a covenant with them. Okay? Just in case, also, further down, just in case Eliezer is deceiving them and is actually some weird rich perv, they ask Rivka before they send her off with him. They say, do you want to go with this man? And she has to then make the decision. So they give her deference. This is her life. This is a big thing for her. And they give her the choice to choose whether ultimately she'll be married to this man or not. So this idea that the betrothed marriages back then were just all about, hey, you're going to go with them, you're going to go with them, and you don't have any choice in the matter. Some of it may have been like that, but we see evidence otherwise in stories like this. Finally, here we have them blessing Rivka, a wedding and a farewell blessing ritual. So they don't get to go to the wedding because it's far away, but they're giving them a farewell blessing. Rivka dismounts the camel and veils herself in Isaac's presence. This is a deference ritual. She just dismounts the camel. She's not going to be higher than Isaac, who's out in the field meditating. She's getting down to be deferring to his status. She veils herself. This is a modesty and wedding ritual also. Back then, the women that were getting married would veil themselves. Okay, so this is things that she's doing to be polite. And then finally, I want to say that Rivka inherits Sarah's legacy, and this is symbolized by the term entering Sarah's tent. Okay, she inherits Sarah's legacy as a woman of valor, Ishet Chayei, and she becomes the new matriarch to fill the hole that Sarah left. Okay, so here's some more thoughts that I had when I was examining this. We're almost done, so stay with me, please. What would have happened if Abraham requested a plot for burial in Genesis 23, and the Hittites said, nope? What do you think? Any ideas? No? Okay. The rabbis thought about this, and they said, this verse here tells us the answer. I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Okay? They say, that the explanation, and this is found in the Midrash Agadah, Genesis Rabbah 58:6. They say the word stranger and sojourner, or stranger and an inhabitant in Hebrew, that is telling us this story here. If you are willing to sell me a burial property, I'm a stranger. But if not, I will be as an inhabitant, and I will take it legally, for the Holy One, blessed be He, said to me, your seed I will give this land. So this is sort of a hint here that he's saying, hey, if you if you want to give it to me, I'll be a stranger and we'll be polite. If you don't want to give it to me, then I'm going to have to take up the promise of the Holy One, blessed be He, and take this land, because that is my honor status, my honor code for my society, and you don't get to hold yours over mine, because mine is held up by the promise of God. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Perhaps, I mean, would he take it by force? I don't know. That's kind of an interesting idea. If they didn't let him bury, that would be a huge diss, right? That would be so rude, and so such a diss in an honor shame society, I think, would warrant Abraham going out and taking the land by force, because that would have been a way that they would have been bringing shame on Abraham, making him stay with his wife's corpse. What a diss that would be. And so I think that's what would have happened if they said no. But they didn't, thank goodness. So perhaps this can remind us, it can be a reminder for when we're dealing with non-believers and non-biblical neighbors, that sometimes confrontation isn't the best way to act, right? He's giving them the choice to choose whether they want to sell the land or not, and he has the right to it. He can go and claim it, right? Name it and claim it. But he doesn't need to do so, because he's going to give them the opportunity to do a mitzvah. He's giving them an opportunity to do a mitzvah and a kindness, and that's a good thing. He elevated their spiritual status by giving them that opportunity. So another idea here, and this brings up a different question, this idea of how to interact with non-believers. I often talk about this. In talking of politeness and etiquette and respect, I am reminded of a common charge that is leveled against us as believers. And that charge is cultural imperialism. Okay? Cultural imperialism. People who level this charge against us, they say that our faith is no better than that McDonald's sign, and that it's encroaching upon their beautiful, wonderful culture, and that it's just making it ugly and Western. And they say, you guys are just a bunch of jerks. You guys are dishonorable. You guys are mean. You guys don't respect their religions. And so you're going out and you're imposing yours. You're imperials. That's what they say about people who evangelize, about spreading the good news of the Messiah's death and resurrection. So how do we deal with that? I want to tell you a little story too. I chose this one in China for a good reason, because in my Chinese and Japanese religion class, I was sitting there and they were talking about when Christians came to Japan. And basically my teacher said something to the effect of, when the Christians got there in Japan, they had this intolerant concept that Jesus was the only way to God. It was intolerant and bigoted. And so says the Gospel of John. And so when the Christians came to Japan with this intolerant, bigoted message, the Japanese, well, chuckle, chuckle, they crucified them. And they cut off their heads. And if it's good enough for your Messiah, well, it's good enough for you. And here the whole class chuckles with him. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I raise my hand and state, I think the ones that are crucifying these Christians are the ones that are the intolerant and bigoted ones. They're the ones that don't have the multicultural tolerance, right? They can't tolerate Christianity. So I said that, and he nodded his head, and he agreed with me to his credit. But I could tell it was with a little gusto, because he obviously didn't like Christianity, and he was probably sad that I injected some reality into his fun. But this story illustrates an attitude our culture has, right? Think of the word proselytism. they say, oh, they're proselytizing, a bunch of proselytes, you know. That's a negative word that has a negative feeling to it when you hear it. Evangelism has a good, positive sound to it when you say it, but proselytism doesn't. And it's no mistake that unfortunately, the state of Israel, proselytism is illegal. And this is sort of where this word came about in becoming negative. It wasn't always a negative word. I think it's a symptom of a larger issue here. When they're saying things like, evangelism was rude and disrespectful because you're telling me I'm wrong and you're right, and if I don't agree with you, then I'm going to hell. When they say things like that, what they're dealing with is a concept in their head of multiculturalism and the anti-honor culture. So I was telling you that we have gotten rid of the honor culture in our society, but we really haven't. We've replaced it with a different honor culture. It's an anti-honor culture. It's against the old ways, and if you're against the old ways, if you're against societal structure, if you're against roles, then you're honorable. But if you are for those things, then you are dishonorable and you're shameful. Yeah? So this is the concept of multiculturalism. On its face, multiculturalism seems nice. You know, it seems positive and happy. You guys have seen these. Yeah? It seems like a nice thing. Acceptance, tolerance, peace. These are positive things and positive words that are grouped along with this concept. Yeah? If you agree with them. Yeah. Everybody's way is their truth. All beliefs and religions are proclaimed to be equal in worth. And so when people grow up in this society where beliefs and religions are considered equal in worth, then they begin to believe that they're equal in value and validity, right? And so thus they begin to naturally assume that all religions lead to God. And I've heard this so many times. Oh man, I'm not going to judge you for what you believe because I think all religions lead to God. Blah, blah, blah. And they mean well. I don't want to misunderstand them. They mean well. They're trying to be nice because they've subscribed to the anti-honor culture, that it's honorable to let you do your thing and I'm going to do my thing. And in a sense, some of that is correct. But where it goes wrong is where they get to this idea that since we should tolerate in this country other religions, that means that they're all right. And in Israel, other religions weren't tolerated in God's kingdom. That wasn't how it was. And that's not how it should be. Okay? Why? Why is that rude? Think about it. We believe that God is the true God. If we're following him and obeying him, that's a good thing. And if we're following other gods and letting those things come into the land, then that is an affront to him. So basically it comes down to, do you believe if God is real or not? If God is real, then these things are an affront to him. If he's just an idea in our head that we're just going along and playing church, then we can go and play church and let everybody else play church, and it's okay. And we can all play church together, right? So that's what it comes down to. Is God really real? And if he's real, and what his word says, he doesn't let any other gods before him. So this basically makes multiculturalism a living contradiction, because it basically leads to monoculturalism, right? It leads to one culture. So that one culture is the anti-honor culture. If you don't agree with this, then you are bigoted and intolerant. That is the anti-honor culture. And anybody in any religion or any non-religion or whatever, they can all be a part of this monoculture. And it's not really multicultural anymore. It's monocultural. So I'm saying that the imperial cult of secular, multicultural, polytheistic, humanistic behavior becomes orthodox. It's the new orthodoxy. It's imperials. They're the imperials, not us. They're the Darth Vaders, not us. Okay? And it's humanistic because, like I said, multiculturalism isn't against the concept of religion as long as it doesn't contradict the orthodoxy and make absolute truth claims. If it does so, then it's against multiculturalism. So any religion that exists in their ideal society cannot serve their god or gods, but rather the religion is simply therapeutic. It's there for you. That's why I say that it's humanistic, because it's centered on humans and not on God. So any religion in a multicultural society has to be therapeutic and not focused on the Most High. It's humanism. So this system inevitably breaks down its constituents' own honor code for its overarching anti-honor code because of tolerance. So when you're somebody in this system and you have your religion and you think you're keeping your religion, but you're subscribing to this idea, it's breaking down your honor code. Because every claim that was made by every religion is a truth claim. Even the ones that aren't truth claims, like Taoism, when they say, or Buddhism, all is an illusion. Well, that's a truth claim. You're saying that everything's an illusion. That's a statement. And so if you are in a religion that's subscribing to multiculturalism, then it's broken down your own honor and value system, and you've subscribed to that one instead of your own. And so therefore you are part of the monoculture. Does that make sense? So basically when multicultural orthodoxy takes over, these honor codes have to submit to it. And that's why religions that have no real structure or honor codes flourish under multiculturalism, like Taoism, Zen Buddhism, Baha'i, and liberal versions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As long as they submit to this, they're acceptable. But when they don't, that is imperial and it's intolerant. So how do we deal with this? First of all, we have a commandment from Yeshua to witness to the peoples of the earth, and this is the Great Commission. Okay, our primary purpose as the people of Israel was to be a light to the nations. So if we're wanting to deal with this, we can't just give up and shut up and become part of the monoculture. We have to keep the teachings of our Messiah, Yeshua, and follow God in the proper way. So be a light to the nations. So we can't stop spreading the word. We have to keep spreading the word because that's a commandment from God. We have to be we have to not subscribe to the culture's definition of truth, or I'm sorry, of nice. The culture's definition of nice means don't witness, don't talk about it, just keep it private in your own life, and don't talk about it. We have to be willing, like Paul, to take a stoning for it. He even took a stoning for it. And if it seems like this concept of being strong in your faith and witnessing is going against all the stuff I talked about being polite, it's not. Because we can be doing these things in a polite way. In fact, Colossians 4 verse 5 said, be full of grace and charity. It said to be kind and respectful. It said to season your conversation with salt. We can do it. And finally, dust off your feet and move on when they clearly don't want to hear anymore. I think a lot of the problem stems from people just doggedly going after it and beating the dead horse. The horse is dead, guys. It doesn't want to be beaten anymore. It doesn't want to deal with what you're trying to say. And so that involves listening. That's a politeness ritual. That involves listening and seeing when the person obviously is done. And then you stop. And you dust off your feet and you go to the next. Okay? So we can witness and we can do these things and be polite and respectful at the same time. So finally, I have a few things to say as a conclusion. Paul said that our speech should be full of grace and seasoned with salt. And I think this is a rabbinic reference, because Paul's a rabbi, to Leviticus 2, verse 13, where God commands every offering to be seasoned with salt. All the offerings are to be seasoned with salt. Now, it's a reference to this, in my opinion, because Paul also calls us to be living sacrifices. So when he says that you should be seasoned with salt, he's referencing that we, in our living unto God and becoming living sacrifices, we also, just like the sacrifices, have to be seasoned with salt. What does that mean? That also goes into why Yeshua said, the salt which loses its saltiness is thrown out and trampled by men. And it also makes sense why he said you should be the salt of the earth. Yeah? So who is a negative example of being salty? Salty actually in our culture saying somebody is salty isn't a nice thing anymore. It means that they're kind of disagreeable and kind of boorish and not friendly. So, but we're not talking about our cultures. Who's a really salty person in a bad way in the Bible? I'd say Lot's wife. Yeah? Well, think about it. She turned back, okay? She turned back to Sodom and Gomorrah, and she went back. Why did she do that? Turning back is teshuvah. She didn't teshuvah towards Torah. She teshuvah towards the opposite of Torah, towards Sodom and Gomorrah. She went back towards that place because it had all these practices and ways and mores that she enjoyed. And she didn't want to go with Lot, with the angels, to adhere to a new honor code and a new system of politeness and etiquette and a way to walk called the Torah. She didn't want that. So she turned around and went back, and she got destroyed along with the rest of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all that's left are pillars of salt. So she is an example of a salty person in the wrong way. And she was Lot's wife. But Lot had a relative named Abraham. And that brings us back to the fact that Sarah, Abraham's wife, was a great example of how to be a salty person in a good way. She was seasoned with salt in her life. And this text talks about, or the rabbis talk about, this text, it's called Chayei Sarah, but it's all about her death. And why is that? And I think it's because it's honoring, it's respecting, and it's showing these deference to her status as a matriarch of Israel and the salty, wonderful woman that she was. Okay? So I think that leaves us with the fact that we want to be like Sarah and have a life like hers and be considered full of grace, full of love and charity and politeness towards each other and gentleness, self-control. We want to be like that, and we want to be like Rebecca, who took Sarah's mantle up and became a replacement for her in Abraham's family. So let's be like that. Let's be honorable, and let's be respectful and charitable towards each other, and let's build that culture into our nation. Amen? Amen. Shabbat shalom, guys. Thank you.